With his choice of Texas, Stoker alighted on an area so vast and the product of so many disparate human forces and influences that efforts to place Morris in his native environment are easily frustrated. He comes, Stoker says, from Texas. He does not specifically say that he is a Texan. He may have been a second or third generation Texan, or, along with thousands of others, been an immigrant from another state. Either way, the pre-Civil War methods of profiteering in Texas were succeeded by decades of comparative austerity, the product of the emancipation of slaves and the consequent disruption of the cotton industry. The value of the land collapsed, and most Texans were more concerned with staying alive than with striking it rich, for there was an Indian menace and resentful, unpaid veterans of the war to guard against. The Ku Klux Klan also made their first appearance in Texan history at this time. The commonest Texan pastimes in those troubled years were said to be drinking, card-playing, and shooting. Taken as a whole, Texas had to wait until the 20th century before recapturing the money-making opportunities of its pre-Civil War heyday. Not long before Morris's death in 1893, Texas was viewed by many Americans as a marginal region almost at the edge of civilization. To account for this, it is probable that much, if not all, of Morris's fortune was the product of his parents' or grandparents' endeavors, and that he was something of a globe-trotting playboy. This would not leave much time for money-making, other than by speculation of one kind or another, and it rules out any kind of professional career. If, however, Morris was more than simply a playboy son of affluent stock, how did he come by his fortune in post-Reconstruction Texas? Oil had little significance until the 20th century, and manufacturing was only just becoming profitable by the 1880s. More plausibly, he might have been a cattle baron or a railroad entrepreneur. One television adaptation of Dracula casts Morris as a diplomat, exploiting the established tradition of Texan frontiersmen dabbling in politics, though politicians were one species of American known not to have impressed Stoker. Alternatively, in his working notes, Stoker mentions an American inventor from Texas, though this is crossed out. The reason for this greater attention being paid to one of Stoker's minor personages is to prepare the ground for a radical conjecture. Several critics have been puzzled by the seeming incongruity of a nobody like Quincy Morris taking precedence in the final pages of Dracula. This incongruity is made congruous if the possibility is explored that Morris was in league with the Count. This hypothesis has been presented most forcibly by Moretti, who opens his argument by noting the inexplicability of Morris's death, and that it is totally extraneous to the logic of the narrative. Moretti then takes a closer look at the American's activities in the novel, for Morris is shrouded in mystery. He looks so young and fresh that it seems almost impossible that he has been to so many places and has had such adventures. What places? What adventures? Where does all his money come from? What does Mr. Morris do? Where does he live? Nobody knows any of this. But nobody suspects. Nobody suspects even when Lucy dies and then turns into a vampire, immediately after receiving a blood transfusion from Morris. Nobody suspects when Morris, shortly afterwards, tells the story of his mare, sucked dry of blood in the pampas by one of those big bats they call vampires. It is the first time that the name vampire is mentioned in the novel, but there is no reaction. And there is no reaction a few lines further on, when Morris, coming close to me, spoke in a fierce half-whisper. What took it? The blood. The blood out. But Dr. Seward shakes his head. he hasn't the faintest idea, and Morris, reassured, promises to help. Nobody finally suspects when, in the course of the meeting to plan the vampire hunt, Morris leaves the room to take a shot, missing naturally at the big bat, but nearly hitting the people inside, on the window ledge listening to the preparations, or when, after Dracula bursts into the household, Morris hides among the trees, the only effect of which is that he loses sight of Dracula and invites the others to call off the hunt for the night. This is pretty well all Morris does in Dracula. He would be totally superfluous character if, unlike the others, he were not characterized by this mysterious connivance with the world of vampires. So long as things go well for Dracula, Morris acts like an accomplice. As soon as there is a reversal of fortunes, he turns into his staunchest enemy. And at the moment when Morris dies, and the threat disappears, old England grants its blessing to this excessively pushy and unscrupulous financier, and raises him to the dignity of Bengal Lancer, and to our bitter grief, with a smile and silence, he died, a gallant gentleman. These, it should be noted, are the last words of the novel, whose true ending does not lie, as is clear by now, in the death of the Romanian count, but in the killing of the American financier. Following up Moretti's lead, it is possible to unearth several incidents in the novel which lent support to his contention. When Lucy dies upon receiving Morris's blood, he abets her death, which the Count is trying to bring about. Again, once the decision is taken to exclude Harker's wife from the hunt for Dracula, it is Morris who ensures she is left alone, thereby enabling the Count to visit her without hindrance. It is then Morris who discovers Dracula's rats in the chapel. Dracula's advances to Harker's wife behind a locked door are actively encouraged by the Texan, who tries to avert Van Helsing's intrusion by twice protesting against violating a woman's bedroom, the only occasion in the book in which he is concerned with propriety. In the ensuing chase, Morris is in a position to give false directions to assist the Count in making good his escape. Later, after Renfield has tried to impede Dracula and has been abandoned by the doctors, the next person to see him is Morris, who reports his death. Finally, when Dracula is almost cornered in a house in Piccadilly, it is Morris's self-imposed function to prohibit escape through the window. How does Dracula escape? Through the window. Whatever the plausibility of Moretti's reassessment, it is worth noting that when Stoker was laying down the plot for his novel, in an early formulation, he left clues. His Texan, whose name went through several changes, was forever turning up, then disappearing. Once, Seward was intended to receive two visitors, the Count and the Texan together. Significantly, chapters 3 and 4 of Book 3 were supposed to have been the Texan journey to Transylvania, alone and at his own request. Although this was later scrapped from the finished novel, the question remains, what did Stoker intend should happen to him there?
And felt your heart beat